All right, so here we are. It is the 21st. This is part B of me literally 10 years ago escaping across the country. For real. I didn't think I was going to be escaping across the country, but that's what ended up happening. So the vice president followed me around. Bob Minton got me a first class ticket. I get into the lounge for first class people. Thus, the vice president can't come in there. Now I'm on the plane. I'm like, whew. And you can imagine, well, maybe you can't imagine, most of you can't, but people who were in can imagine just how, talk about, wow, what a weirdo trip this is. 24 hours ago, I didn't believe they did fair game. And you have to understand, this had gone way back. In the 80s, I'd stood up in the courtroom with Margaret Singer, who's a psychologist, saying, that is not true. Scientology, the Church of Scientology does not do fair game. Right? So this had gone on for years and years with me insisting they don't do it. So now, here I am, 24 hours ago, I didn't think so. Now I realize they do. They canceled my van, right? And now she's followed me around the airport, excuse me, and now I'm in the plane. And I'm like, oh, wow, that was weird. That was really weird. And remember, all the critics who had said online, don't worry about it, Magoo, as soon as you wake up, we'll be here. 99% of them turned on me. Said, forget it. She's a top secret agent. Don't trust her. Andreas, don't talk to her. It was just like, oh. So for 24 hours, Andreas was my only friend. And that's a pretty spooky thing to be in, where you've only got one friend. But I want you all to remember, one friend can mean an awful lot to somebody. And you never know what kind of position they're in. And Andreas probably saved my life many times over. Excuse me. So now, it's 24 hours after that. Bob and Stacy and Jesse are now helping me, but I'm still kind of freaky on this whole thing, right? But I'm thinking I'm okay. I'm sort of resting. I'm like, I got to get off the plane in Chicago and change to Tampa, but I figure that'll be okay too. So now we arrive in Chicago. Now you have to know a couple things. One, you're probably wondering, where was her husband on all this? Well, first of all, my husband was born in the Church of Scientology. I mean, not literally, but his parents were in 1950. So he was in, he was in Dianetics, and then as they switched into Scientology, he was just moved along as a Scientologist, right? So he was raised as a Scientologist. So he never was in on any of this stuff I was in on, and neither was Bill Yardy's wife. It's sort of like, I think they find who will do what, and they get you to do whatever you're going to do, right? And I trusted Bill, so there you go. I'm doing my stuff. Number two, he was a salesperson, and he was on the road. And now he'd been on the road 3 weeks out of a month. So he was only coming home for 1 week. And when I would be making these 4,000 posts in 4 weeks, he was only home for 1 week. And I remember him saying, do I have to make a date with you to go out with you or something? And I was like, this is very important. This is really, really important. I'm doing something on the internet. I can't tell you, and this whole thing. Anyway. So there's that. Anyway, so he was on the road the day I left. He was out of town. So now I land in Chicago. All I'm planning on doing is switching planes. Getting on one plane, switching to another plane, and I'm off. I'm walking through the airport. And who walks up but my husband, Harold Bazazian. Tori, how are you? We need to go on a vacation. That's the first thing that comes out of his mouth. He doesn't say, what the hell are you doing? What's going on? Come on over here. We need to talk. Which, frankly, if he'd said that, I probably would have talked to him, and it might have been a whole different thing. But instead, he says, we need to go on a vacation. Now, for me, he doesn't even know this. And I know he trusts Bill Yardy as much as I did until I realized Yardy was in this thing with David Miscavige, right? And not trustworthy because he was nuts, right? But I know my husband hasn't had that realization that he and Miscavige are nuts, right? And so he is being run by Bill. I realize this. And Bill is being run by Miscavige. And their goal, and I know this, is to lock me up. And then he says, we need to go on a vacation, like to a cabin in Wisconsin. And I'm like, oh my God. And I, for years, heard about the introspection rundown, which is what they did on Lisa McPherson. And if you haven't seen it, lisamcpherson.org tells the story. But she was locked up in a room for 17 days, and she did end up dead. And that's thanks to being at the hands of the Church of Scientology. So I was always terrified about this introspection rundown because I have seizures. I don't anymore. I haven't had them for 20 years. But that concept, they were always kind of evaluating and making me feel like there was something wrong with me. And I was always afraid they were going to lock me up in a room. And I had told my husband, you can never let them lock me up in a room because they will kill me. I know it. And you've got to promise me, you've got to swear to God, if they ever take me, you will come get me out of there. And he's like, no, worry about it. They're not going to lock you up. And if they ever did, I'll come get you. But now we're in a different position. And I know they are terrified that I know all this information about the top secret mafia, right? He doesn't know. I know this stuff. And he believes in Yachty, just like I did, right? And so he's like, Tori, we need to go on a vacation. And I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, no, we don't need to go on a vacation. I am going to Florida. And my view was like, it was sort of a bridge out of this cult, right? On my first dynamic, which means me, Tori. That was it. My plan was to get out, meet these people, find out what's going on, go back and educate my husband and get him out. Remember, I still didn't really have any idea the extent they would do fair game. And I'm quite sure while I was gone, they totally powered my husband, filled him with these lies, and thus I never got to talk to him again, really. But at the time, I knew what would happen. So anyway, I say no, I'm not going on vacation. I'm going to Florida, right? And he's like, I'm like, what are you doing here? And he's like, I just happen to be here in the airport. You know, what are you doing, honey? We got to go on a vacation. And I'm like, no, we don't have to go on a vacation. I got to get on the plane. I'm going to Florida. So now the Office of Special Affairs shows up, right? And I'm like, I thought you said you were just by yourself in the airport. You know, you have to imagine how freaked out I am. Now I know my husband is in with Bill Yachty and the Office of Special Affairs, right? And they have a stack of papers that they say you have to read these papers about these people you are going to see. And I'm like, fine, give me your papers, your effing papers. I put them in a bag like I could care less, and I never read them, Osa, ever. Because I know how you slime people, and I didn't care. I wanted to meet them in person myself, right? But I took them, and now my husband says, excuse me, I'm coming with you. And I'm like, no, you're not coming with me. Because I get the image that it's going to be Yachty and my husband. And they're going to come with me. I mean, I knew they'd fly Bill in. I just had the feeling. And it'd be Bill, my auditor and friend, and Harold. And I knew that my husband would say, you know, what are you doing? You know, it's us against them. And these are these horrible people, right? And I knew if I let him come with me, there's no way I would have been able to, you know, look at the facts and look at the truth and make up my own mind on it. But you have to imagine what an unbelievable, painful moment that was for me, right? You know, it's just like, if I let him come, I'm going to have to dig my head back in the sand and pretend like all these abuses I've seen, them stopping free speech, breaking up families, medical abuse, all these creepy things, as well as changing the tech, etc. I'm going to have to put my head in the sand and pretend like it didn't happen, right? I mean, I don't think all this through, but this is all in the back of my head, right? And I know Bill, and I know Harold, and I know how strong they are, and I knew they were going to say, you know, it's us against them. You have to come with us. And I knew I wouldn't be able to do it. I just couldn't do that. So I said, no, get away from me. And again, I said to him, if I have to call the police, I am getting on that airplane. And that was a huge thing to say to my husband of 27 years. God damn it, I hate it when I cry like this. You know, like Oprah says, there's like good tears and there's like ugly tears. And anyway, I know, don't even tell me it's okay to cry. I know it's okay to cry, but it's weird to cry when you're on camera. But I want you guys to get, all of this is going through me. I didn't cry then in the airport because I was too freaked out. I was too scared. I was like, I got to get on the plane. That's it. But now looking back at it, I look at, oh, God, it was just unbelievable. So I say, I'm going to call the police. If you follow me, if you get on the plane, I'm going to call the police. Okay, because I am getting out of here and I'm getting on that plane by myself. So I do. I get on the plane. I sit back again. I'm like, what a fucking nightmare this is. You know what I mean? This is like way more than I thought. You know, I just thought I was like kind of going to see these people and meet them. And it's like, now I'm up against the Church of Scientology. And now in 3D, I'm seeing who these people are. You know, the really, really dark side of them. The really, really reason I left. And they're proving to me as I'm going across the country, this is why I'm leaving this stupid church. And if you're listening, Gavino and Yachty, this is why I left the stupid Church of Scientology, because it's crap-ass stuff that you still do, and somebody just left this Church of Scientology last week, and they told me, Yachty, you're still on the internet, you're still doing the same creepy stuff, just so you know. All right, so now I get on the plane, and I think, okay, I'm fine now, because I've been going to Flag for 7 years, back in the 90s, and I knew I went twice a year for my 6-month check, and the Church of Scientology only comes until midnight. They do not come after midnight. That's it. So I think, okay, I'm fine. Because they're not going to come out. This plane lands in Tampa, Florida at 1:45 in the morning. So I'm like sitting there going, what a nightmare. Okay, so there you go. I think I'm fine. I'm going to meet Bob, Stacy, and Jesse. That's it. We'll find out, and then I'm going to come back home. That's it. I'm going to leave it here. Part 3 will be coming up in a few minutes. Wow. Amazing. Okay. Thank you for watching. Thank you, everyone who helps expose these abuses. This is why I love you.